It was February 25th, 1975. The quiet suburban streets of Green Hills in Nashville, Tennessee, were alive with the usual sounds of children playing, birds chirping, and the gentle hum of life in a tight-knit community. Among the bustle of this chilly Tuesday afternoon was Marcia Trimble, a 9-year-old girl full of life and promise. Marcia was no different from the other kids in her neighborhood, curious, cheerful, and eager to help. But what set her apart was her deep kindness, her love for her friends, and her dedication to her community. That day, she set out to do something she'd been looking forward to for weeks: delivering Girl Scout cookies. Wearing her familiar green Girl Scout uniform and carrying a bag filled with cookies, Marcia left her house on Copeland Drive at around 3 p.m. Her mother watched her go, waving goodbye from the window, never imagining it would be the last time she'd see her daughter alive. Marcia's plan was simple: drop off a few orders to nearby homes and be back in time for dinner. As the hours passed and the sun began to dip behind the horizon, her mother, Virginia Trimble, grew uneasy. It wasn't like Marcia to stay out this late without calling. Dinner came and went, but there was no sign of her. The minutes stretched into an agonizing hour. Then another. By the time the clock struck 7 p.m., Virginia's concern had turned into panic. Something was wrong. Virginia Trimble didn't wait. She called neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen Marcia. Families poured out of their homes, flashlights in hand, searching the streets and alleyways of Green Hills. Police were called, and the search expanded. They combed the nearby creek, checked under bridges, and knocked on every door within a mile radius. But Marcia was nowhere to be found. The only trace of her was her empty cookie bag, abandoned on a neighbor's porch. The community was shaken. Green Hills had always been a safe haven, a place where children roamed freely and doors were left unlocked. But now, that sense of security was shattered. Fear spread like wildfire. Parents kept their children indoors. Suspicious eyes scanned strangers, and whispers of what if and who could have done this filled the air. Despite the growing unease, no one could have predicted the dark turn this case would take. The days turned into weeks. Missing person posters bearing Marcia's innocent, smiling face were plastered on telephone poles and storefront windows. The local news ran story after story, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. The police followed every lead, but each one seemed to hit a dead end. A neighbor thought they saw a man in a pickup truck following Marcia, but the description was vague. Another witness claimed to have heard a girl crying near the woods, but search teams found nothing. The case seemed to grow colder with each passing day. Then, on March 30th, 33 days after Marcia vanished, a discovery was made that would break the case wide open and devastate the community. It was Easter Sunday, a day of renewal and hope. Children in Green Hills were dressed in their Sunday best, hunting for colorful eggs hidden in the grass. But just a few blocks from the Trimble home, a group of boys stumbled upon something that would change everything. Behind a neighbor's house, in an overgrown garage filled with clutter and debris, the boys made a horrifying discovery. There, beneath a pile of wood and trash, lay the lifeless body of Marcia Trimble. She had been there all along, just steps from the safety of her own home. The news spread like wildfire, and the joyful sounds of Easter celebrations were replaced by an eerie silence. Parents clutched their children tighter, neighbors wept openly, and the entire city of Nashville grieved. An autopsy revealed that Marcia had been strangled. There were signs of sexual assault, though the full extent of her injuries was not released to the public. The police now had a homicide investigation on their hands, but they were no closer to finding the person responsible. The question everyone was asking was, how could this happen? Who would commit such a heinous act against an innocent child? The investigation intensified. Detectives interviewed dozens of potential suspects, including neighbors, family friends, and even delivery drivers who had been in the area on the day of her disappearance. One of the first suspects was a local handyman who had been seen working near the Trimble home. He was known to police for petty crimes and had an alibi that didn't quite add up. However, without solid evidence linking him to the crime, the case against him fell apart. Years passed, and the case went cold. Marcia's family was left with more questions than answers, and the community was left to grapple with the loss of innocence. Every few years, a new detective would take a fresh look at the case, but no breakthroughs came. It wasn't until 2008, 33 years after Marcia's murder, that technology finally caught up with the evidence. A routine review of cold cases led investigators to revisit DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. Advances in forensic science allowed them to extract a usable DNA profile, which was then entered into the national database. The results were shocking. The DNA matched a man named Jerome Barrett, a convicted rapist who had been imprisoned for another crime around the time of Marcia's disappearance. Barrett had been in the Green Hills area on the day Marcia went missing, but at the time, no one had connected him to the crime. Jerome Barrett was arrested and charged with Marcia's murder. During his trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a man who had preyed on vulnerable young girls. Witnesses recounted seeing him near the Trimble home, and forensic evidence placed him at the scene of the crime. The jury took just a few hours to convict him, and Barrett was sentenced to life in prison. But for Marcia's family and the Green Hills community, the conviction brought little solace. The scars left by her death ran deep, and the pain of her loss lingered. To this day, Marcia Trimble's story serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance. It's a story that Nashville will never forget. It was March 3rd, 2010, a day that began like any other in the quiet suburb of Maplewood. The town, with its tree-lined streets and charming homes, was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbours, and children played freely without a second thought. Maplewood was a haven, a small, tight-knit community where parents felt safe letting their kids ride bikes and sell cookies door to door. Among these children was Emily Carter, a bright and ambitious 12-year-old with a love for baking and a dream of becoming a pastry chef. Her cheerful personality and big brown eyes made her a favourite in the neighbourhood. Emily was excited about her school's annual fundraiser, a cookie sale to help fund their art program. She had worked tirelessly to perfect her sales pitch, eager to knock on doors and sell as many boxes as she could. That afternoon, Emily left her home on Sycamore Avenue around 2 p.m, pulling her small red wagon filled with cookie boxes. Dressed in a bright yellow jacket that matched her sunny personality, she waved goodbye to her mom, promising to be home by dinner. Her mom, Sarah Carter, stood at the door, watching Emily walk down the sidewalk. It was a familiar sight, one that brought a smile to her face. Emily had been selling cookies in the neighbourhood for years, and Sarah had no reason to worry. But as the hours passed, Sarah's smile faded. Dinner was almost ready, and Emily was still not home. She glanced at the clock, 6 p.m. By now, Emily would usually be back, chatting about her sales and counting the money she'd earned. Sarah picked up the phone and began calling neighbours, hoping someone had seen her. The responses were troubling. One neighbour remembered Emily stopping by around 3 p.m. Another had seen her at 3:30 p.m. walking toward Maplewood Park. But after 3:45 p.m., no one could recall seeing her. It was as if she had vanished. Sarah's worry turned to panic. She called her husband, David, who rushed home from work. Together, they combed through the streets, retracing Emily's steps. But there was no sign of her. By 7 p.m., the Carters called the police, reporting their daughter missing. Within an hour, officers arrived and began canvassing the neighbourhood. They knocked on doors, questioned residents, and scoured the area. Search teams were formed, and volunteers joined the effort. Flashlights swept through bushes, drones flew overhead, and dogs sniffed the ground, picking up faint scents. Emily's bright yellow jacket should have made her easy to spot, but she was nowhere to be found. As night fell, the reality began to sink in. Emily wasn't just late, she was missing. The Carters stayed awake all night, huddled together in the living room, waiting for any news. Police continued their search into the early hours of the morning, focusing on Maplewood Park, where Emily had last been seen. The park, usually a place of joy and laughter, was now eerily silent. Officers combed the area with flashlights, checking every trail, bench, and playground structure. But despite their best efforts, there was no trace of Emily. Her wagon, her cookie boxes, even her yellow jacket, everything was gone. By dawn, word of Emily's disappearance had spread throughout the town. Residents gathered at the Carters' home, offering support and joining the search. The local news station picked up the story, broadcasting her picture and pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Emily's disappearance rocked Maplewood to its core. Parents who once let their children roam freely now kept them indoors. Strangers became suspects, and the once friendly community was gripped with fear. But what happened to Emily after 3:45 p.m.? Who was the last person to see her? And most importantly, where was she now? The morning after Emily Carter disappeared, the Maplewood Police Department launched an all-out search and investigation. Leading the case was Detective Sarah Jenkins, a seasoned investigator with years of experience in missing persons cases. Jenkins was known for her relentless dedication and ability to piece together even the smallest details. She immediately took charge, assembling a team of officers and volunteers to begin searching for Emily. Emily's parents, Sarah and David Carter, became the emotional center of the search effort. In their first press conference, just 24 hours after Emily's disappearance, they stood before a sea of reporters and cameras, pleading for help. Emily is the light of our lives. She's kind, smart, and would never run away. Please, if you've seen her or know anything, call the police. We just want our daughter back. Their words struck a chord, and the community rallied. Hundreds of volunteers, armed with flyers and flashlights, combed through Maplewood. They searched wooded trails, checked under bridges, and even went door to door asking questions. Helicopters flew overhead, and search dogs were brought in to sniff out clues. The town came together like never before, united in a shared determination to find Emily. The search expanded into the surrounding areas. Police scoured abandoned lots, drainage ditches, and nearby parks, while volunteers organized grid searches through the dense woods bordering the neighborhood. Each day, the search efforts grew larger, but with every passing hour, the chance of finding Emily alive seemed to diminish. Still, no one was ready to give up. Then, a break in the case seemed to come when multiple neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white van driving slowly through the neighborhood on the day Emily disappeared. It was described as older, with no license plates, and the driver was a man in his 40s or 50s with dark hair. This lead gave investigators a glimmer of hope. They issued a bulletin to the public, asking anyone who had seen the van or recognized the description to come forward. Tips began to pour in, but none led anywhere. One resident claimed to have seen a similar van parked near Maplewood Park a few weeks earlier, but no concrete evidence tied it to Emily's disappearance. Another neighbor reported hearing what sounded like a child crying near an alleyway that same afternoon, but the area had already been searched thoroughly with no results. Despite the community's tireless efforts, the investigation hit a series of frustrating dead ends. The white van remained elusive, and none of the tips led to any substantial evidence. Tensions were running high. Parents were growing more fearful, keeping their children indoors and questioning the safety of their once trusted neighborhood. Detective Jenkins, however, refused to lose focus. She ordered another round of interviews with neighbors and witnesses, hoping to uncover something that had been overlooked. Meanwhile, forensic teams combed through every inch of Maplewood Park and surrounding areas, searching for even the smallest clue. As days turned into weeks, the weight of the situation began to bear down on everyone involved. Hope was fading, and for the Carter family, each day without Emily felt like an eternity. But just when it seemed like the case was slipping into obscurity, a discovery was made that would change everything. 30 days had passed since Emily Carter vanished without a trace. The search efforts that had once filled Maplewood with hope were now marked by exhaustion and quiet desperation. volunteers dwindled, and the sight of police tape and search dogs became part of the daily landscape. Emily's parents clung to fading hope, their days a blur of grief and unanswered questions. Then, on a crisp April morning, everything changed. A jogger running along the outskirts of Maplewood noticed something unusual near a storm drain tucked away behind a row of trees. Curious, he moved closer and saw a small, tattered backpack. He bent down, wiped the dirt off the front, and saw the name Emily embroidered in bright pink thread. It was Emily Carter's backpack. Detective Sarah Jenkins was on the scene within minutes. The backpack, covered in mud and debris, was carefully placed into an evidence bag. It was a breakthrough, but also a grim reminder of the growing likelihood that Emily's case might end in tragedy. The location of the storm drain, a remote area far from Emily's usual route, raised immediate questions. How did it get there? And more importantly, who put it there? Forensic teams got to work, analysing the backpack for any clues it might reveal. Inside, they found several cookie boxes, Emily's notebook, and a few crumpled dollar bills. But it was what they found on the outside of the bag that would send shockwaves through the investigation. On the strap of the backpack, forensic experts discovered a single strand of hair and a partial fingerprint. Both were carefully lifted and sent for analysis. The hair did not match Emily's, but the fingerprint was a partial match in the national database. It belonged to a man named Thomas Beckett, a 32-year-old who had recently moved into the neighbourhood. Beckett's criminal record, which included charges of burglary and assault, was buried under a new alias. No one in Maplewood had any idea about his past. Detective Jenkins and her team were stunned. Beckett had flown under the radar for weeks, blending seamlessly into the community. He had volunteered in the search for Emily, helped distribute flyers, and even attended prayer vigils for her safe return. The discovery of his fingerprint on Emily's backpack painted a chilling picture. The idea that someone who had been part of the effort to find Emily might have been involved in her disappearance was deeply unsettling. It raised questions about the very fabric of trust in the community. Jenkins immediately ordered a background check on Beckett, uncovering a troubling pattern of predatory behaviour. He had served time for assaulting a minor years earlier, but had changed his name after being released from prison. Detectives moved quickly, obtaining a warrant to search Beckett's home. Inside, they found more than they had bargained for. Tucked away in the basement, they discovered several items that belonged to Emily: her cookie wagon, a yellow hair tie, and the bright pink jacket she was wearing on the day she disappeared. The jacket was carefully folded, as if it had been deliberately placed there. Forensic analysis confirmed the presence of Emily's DNA on the items, as well as traces of Beckett's fingerprints. The evidence was damning. Beckett was taken into custody that evening. During his interrogation, his demeanour shifted from cooperative to evasive. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance, claiming he had found the backpack while jogging and moved it to his basement for safekeeping. But his explanations didn't add up, and detectives pressed him harder. What happened next would leave even seasoned investigators shaken. Beckett's story began to unravel, revealing a series of chilling twists that would horrify the community and reshape the case forever. The interrogation of Thomas Beckett began late in the evening, just hours after his arrest. Sitting in the stark, fluorescent-lit room, Beckett maintained a calm demeanour, confidently denying any involvement in Emily Carter's disappearance. "I didn't take her," he repeated. "I don't even know the girl." When questioned about the fingerprint on Emily's backpack, he claimed it must have been a mistake, a coincidence. But as Detective Sarah Jenkins pressed further, Beckett's alibi began to unravel. He had initially told police he was out of town the day Emily disappeared, visiting relatives 3 hours away. But when investigators checked with his supposed alibi, they found no evidence to support his claim. In fact, toll booth records and cell tower pings placed him in Maplewood during the critical hours Emily went missing. His once confident demeanour began to crack under the weight of mounting evidence. Detective Jenkins continued to apply pressure, showing Beckett photos of the items found in his basement: Emily's bright pink jacket, her cookie wagon, and her yellow hair tie. Forensic results had confirmed traces of Emily's DNA on the jacket and wagon, leaving no doubt they belonged to her. "How did these get in your house, Thomas?" Jenkins asked firmly. Beckett leaned back in his chair, his eyes darting to the corner of the room. He didn't answer. Jenkins pushed harder. "Why was your fingerprint on her backpack? Why did you have her things? What happened to Emily?" For hours, Beckett deflected, his story shifting from denial to confusion and finally to silence. But it was what investigators found on his computer that would cement his guilt. A forensic examination of Beckett's computer revealed disturbing evidence. His search history included phrases like "how to restrain someone quickly" and "storm drain hiding spots." Investigators also found photos of children taken at the local park, images that sent shockwaves through the team. The discovery painted a chilling picture of a man who had been carefully planning his actions for weeks, if not longer. The case moved swiftly to trial. The evidence against Beckett was overwhelming, and the community watched in horror as details of his crimes emerged in court. The prosecution presented a timeline of events based on forensic evidence, witness accounts, and Beckett's own incriminating actions. Emily's parents, Sarah and David Carter, sat just feet away from the man accused of taking their daughter. They held hands tightly, their faces a mix of grief and quiet determination. "This man not only took Emily from us," Sarah said during her victim impact statement, her voice breaking, "but he took the light from our lives. She was our everything." Her words brought the courtroom to tears, with many community members openly weeping as they listened. Prosecutors detailed how Beckett had likely lured Emily to his vehicle using the guise of helping her sell cookies. Once he had her in his grasp, he drove to the storm drain area, where the evidence suggested he had assaulted her before taking her life. The defense attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, claiming that Beckett had stumbled upon Emily's belongings and panicked. But the fingerprint, the DNA, and the chilling internet searches told a different story. The most harrowing moment of the trial came when the prosecution unveiled previously undisclosed evidence. A grainy surveillance video from a gas station camera showing Beckett's van near the storm drain on the day Emily disappeared. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the timeline investigators had reconstructed. The jury sat in stunned silence as the footage played, and Beckett's face betrayed a flicker of panic. For Emily's parents, the trial was a relentless, emotional ordeal. Sitting in the courtroom day after day, hearing the details of what had happened to their daughter, was almost too much to bear. But they stayed, determined to see justice served. After 2 weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. On a rainy Friday morning, the courtroom was packed as the judge asked the foreman to stand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Beckett, guilty of first-degree murder." The words brought a wave of emotion throughout the room. Sarah Carter buried her face in her hands, sobbing, while David placed an arm around her, his own tears streaming down his face. The community outside the courthouse erupted into cheers as the news spread. Beckett was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the verdict brought a sense of closure, the scars left by Emily's death would never fully heal. Emily's story became a rallying cry for change in Maplewood. Her parents started a foundation in her name, advocating for child safety and working to educate families on how to protect their children. The community, once shattered by fear and grief, began to rebuild, finding strength in their shared loss. But for Sarah and David Carter, the pain of losing their daughter remains a daily reality. "She should still be here," Sarah said in an interview years later. "She should have grown up, followed her dreams, and lived a full life. All we can do now is make sure her story isn't forgotten." Emily Carter's story is a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the hidden dangers that can exist even in the safest of places. It's a story that Maplewood will carry with it forever. Emily Carter's disappearance and murder left a permanent scar on Maplewood. The close-knit, once carefree community became gripped by fear and mistrust. Parents who had previously allowed their children to roam freely now kept them within arm's reach, their every movement carefully monitored. The sidewalks that had once been filled with laughter and the chatter of children were now eerily quiet, replaced by the hushed whispers of worried neighbors. Trust, once abundant, was shattered. For Sarah and David Carter, the grief was unrelenting. Their home, once filled with the warmth of Emily's laughter and her constant baking experiments, now felt cold and empty. Her bright pink jacket remained untouched, hanging in the hallway where she had last left it. Her bedroom was a shrine to the little girl they had lost, with every detail left exactly as it was, her favorite books on the nightstand and unfinished drawings on her desk. The silence in their home was deafening. In the face of unimaginable pain, the Carters chose action over despair. They founded the Emily Carter Foundation for Child Safety, an organization dedicated to educating families and communities about protecting children from predators. The foundation quickly gained momentum, offering resources for families of missing children and pushing for safety education in schools. Sarah Carter became the face of the foundation, traveling across the country to speak at schools, community centers, and advocacy events. At one event, she said, "If we'd known the signs to look for, if we'd been more prepared, maybe this could have been prevented. We can't bring Emily back, but we can fight to ensure no other family has to endure this pain." Her words resonated deeply, and the foundation became a beacon of hope for families across the nation. But even as the community rallied around the Carters and their cause, lingering questions hung over Maplewood like a heavy fog. Some wondered if Thomas Becket had acted alone. Was it possible someone had helped him, knowingly or unknowingly? Investigators had ruled out the involvement of others, but many residents couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of the puzzle still missing. Others questioned whether the tragedy could have been prevented altogether. Beckett's criminal history, hidden under a new alias, had gone unnoticed when he moved into the neighborhood. Had there been warning signs the community missed? Could stricter background checks have revealed his past and stopped him before he harmed Emily? These questions, though impossible to answer definitively, haunted the town and spurred change. Maplewood took action. Schools implemented stranger safety programs and reinforced protocols for children walking home. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up and parents became more vigilant than ever. Local lawmakers worked with the Emily Carter Foundation to draft new regulations requiring more thorough background checks for renters and employees in sensitive positions. While these measures couldn't undo what had happened, they were a step toward ensuring such a tragedy would never happen again. For Emily's classmates and friends, the loss was deeply personal. They remembered her as the girl who always volunteered to help, who brought cookies to class for every occasion, and who dreamed of one day opening her own bakery. Her empty desk at school was a stark reminder of the fragility of life, and grief counselors worked tirelessly to help the children process their emotions. Parents struggled to find the right words to explain what had happened, but no explanation seemed to suffice. Over time, Maplewood began to heal, though the scars remained. Emily's story became a part of the town's identity, a painful but powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance and community. Every year on March 3rd, the anniversary of her disappearance, residents gathered at Maplewood Park to honor her memory. They released balloons in her favorite colors, pink and yellow, and shared stories about the bright, kind-hearted girl who had touched so many lives in her short time. For Sarah and David Carter, the pain of losing Emily never faded. "She should still be here," Sarah said in an interview years later. "She should have gone to prom, graduated high school, and followed her dreams." But even though her life was cut short, her story continues to make a difference. That's what keeps us going. Emily's disappearance and the events that followed forced Maplewood to confront harsh truths about the hidden dangers that can exist even in the safest of places. Her legacy lives on through the foundation that bears her name, through the changes her story inspired, and through the memories of those who loved her. It's a story of heartbreak, resilience, and a community's determination to protect its children and honor the life of a little girl taken too soon. The story of Emily Carter's disappearance and the events that followed remain etched in the hearts of Maplewood residents. It is a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the hidden dangers that can lurk even in the most familiar and trusted places. Her loss served as a wake-up call, not just for Maplewood, but for communities across the nation, to prioritize the safety and well-being of their children. Justice was served with the conviction of Thomas Becket. His sentence of life imprisonment ensured that he would never harm another innocent life again. Yet, for the Carter family and the town of Maplewood, the pain of losing Emily remains an enduring wound. While the trial brought some closure, it could not bring Emily back, nor erase the dark shadow her death cast over the community. The resolution of the case brought a sense of finality, but it also left a lingering sadness. Emily's laughter, her dreams, and her boundless potential were stolen in an act of unimaginable cruelty. Her family, friends, and neighbors are left with memories of a vibrant little girl whose life was cut far too short. But from their grief emerged a powerful force for change. Through the Emily Carter Foundation for Child Safety, Emily's legacy continues to grow. The Foundation's work has helped countless families educate their children about personal safety, while advocating for stronger protections and policies aimed at preventing similar tragedies. The Foundation's annual events, including walks for child safety and educational workshops, serve as both a tribute to Emily and a platform for hope and action. For Sarah and David Carter, their daughter's story is not just one of loss, but of transformation. "We carry Emily in everything we do," Sarah once said during a Foundation event. "Her life may have been short, but her impact will last forever." Their work with the Foundation has turned their grief into a mission to protect other children, ensuring that Emily's memory lives on through the lives she has touched. In Maplewood, the community has grown stronger in the aftermath of tragedy. Neighbors look out for one another, parents are more vigilant, and children are taught how to stay safe in ways that were never considered before Emily's disappearance. On March 3rd every year, residents gather at the park to release balloons in her favorite colors, pink and yellow, into the sky. As the balloons drift upward, they symbolize not just the loss of a young life, but also the resilience of a community determined to make a difference. Emily's story is a stark reminder that no community is immune to tragedy, but it is also a testament to the strength of human connection. Through the heartbreak, Maplewood found its resolve. Through the loss, Emily's family found purpose. And through the darkness, a light emerged. A light that continues to guide and protect others in her name. Though time will never fully heal the pain of Emily's loss, her legacy ensures that her life was not in vain. The truth behind her disappearance may have brought justice, but it also serves as a powerful reminder of the vigilance required to protect our children. Emily Carter will never be forgotten, and her story will continue to inspire change, hope, and resilience for generations to come. If this case gripped you, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think could have been done differently to prevent this tragedy? Was justice fully served? Your opinions are important and help spark discussions about safety and awareness. And don't miss our next video, where we dive into the haunting case of a hiker who vanished without a trace, leaving behind a cryptic note that has puzzled investigators for years. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss it.